So I put the blame on the board. Okay, you all, not all of you, some of the board are not doing their job. And I'm here to say that. Because every year, we have to do mid-year and a final report. So if they're discrepancy, why can't you address those charter schools and tell them, I'll put them out of business, as they're supposed to be. You have been to regular high school. I'm gonna finish.
I'm not trying to be rude.
Okay, I understand that, but you're at my school now, okay? Okay, so I'm gonna talk. I have peeps out here that want to hear the same thing. But the bottom line is, we must treat all these students as our students. They're not charter schools, they're not the district, they're our school. You all are sitting here today. You got some parents sitting out in the audience who have students in charter school, but you want them to vote for you. Do you want to vote for somebody who's not going to support your child that's in a charter school? I don't think I would. So I'm just saying, I'm just giving you my piece, how I feel about it. And some of the board members have done wonderful jobs, and I'm not going to say you haven't. But I just want you to keep in mind, when you talk about charter school, say some charter school. Because don't make it so generic, because everybody, we're already at war with the district on charter schools, okay? So I can go, I don't want to go into that, but I can give you a lecture on that. But the bottom line is, I have my students that graduate from my school, I have a 86% graduation rate. I have students that are put out of public schools, come to my school, they graduate. And they go to college. I do placement and follow-up. Okay? So I know, I can tell you from back for 5 years where my students went. And I've hired them when they graduate from college. I bring them back here and let them work. So that's all I have to say. Remember, some charter schools, not all.
I think what would be called overachievers, high achievers, exceeding expectations. And as you said, some charter schools do not do that. But there are plenty that do. I'm familiar with 2 that specialize in taking in students who are either on the verge of dropping out or have already dropped out. And I know that this year, those 2 schools graduated 45 students, and I'd be willing to bet that those 45 students would not have graduated, would not have stayed in school had it not been for that charter school.
What I hate about forums is that you can't get to all of the information. And it's easy to get the wrong idea because we're almost forced to speak in cliches. I'm really glad Dr. Banks pointed out some of the issues, because in some ways I think charter schools have more oversight than the so-called regular schools. And I have to tell you, for example, we recently closed a charter school because they didn't fill out all the paperwork properly, and they had some issues with how they were managing day to day. But their PYG, which is percent yearly growth, was 1.3 in reading, which means that they scored their kids, who were kids that met all the demographics that weren't expected to do well, gained more than 30% more than the average in Palm Beach County schools in 1 year. So if we look at outcomes, we should have left that school open, right? But the school was closed because of process and procedures. So we get lost in the rules and lose focus of the goal. And I think that has happened in a lot of this conversation, whether we're talking about the charters or Common Core. But I would just ask the audience to remember one of my favorite quotes, which is by Malcolm X, to make sure that you look for yourself, hear for yourself, and think for yourself, or you'll find yourself loving your enemies and hating your friends.
Yeah, this question is for each of the candidates. If elected, within the first 2 years of your term, will you vote to put a traditional comprehensive high school in Riviera Beach?
I think that, you know, it's a need that the community has expressed for a long time, and as long as the fiscal situation in the district improves, we can look at trying to put schools in the appropriate areas geographically based on the needs of those communities. The sad reality is right now that our district faces a $70+ million capital budget shortfall this year. So we're negative $70 million currently. So if the money's available and we see an opportunity to place schools in areas that need them, I would absolutely be in favor of voting for them. But if the money's not available, it would be disingenuous for me or any other candidate to say, yes, we're going to vote and build a school when we have negative $70 million this year and it's supposed to go up and up over the next decade. So, you know, hopefully the fiscal conditions improve and we can build such schools to accommodate populations that need it. If the money's available, I'd be in favor of such an idea.
I'd like to respond to that. Justin is correct. 73 million now in a shortfall for capital. But I tell you, I lived here in Riviera Beach, and I cringe every time I think about our children having to be bused all the way to Palm Beach Gardens and William T. Dwyer and not having a home. We moved away at a while so that my daughter was able to go to a school, but we didn't have any schools in our neighborhood, and she had to be bused east. It's not a good thing to bus students when they can't participate and have a real identity at home. We've got to find a way to find the land and find the money to get a high school in Riviera Beach. I don't know how, but we need to work it and figure out how that can be done.
But I grew up in Broward County, and I went to a magnet school similar to what occurred here at Suncoast when it was one. So I went down to Hollandale High School. And I really loved my school. I had a great education. But one of the things that I think was severely lacking in my education is the community feel. Because though there were some people from the community within that neighborhood, and though I did get to know everyone that lived around there, I didn't live close enough to them to spend time with them after school hours. They weren't my friends on the weekends. And so even though I did have friends that were all over the county, and that was a wonderful thing, I think that the community needs to have a community school, and I think that you have such strength that comes from that, and such a hub for activity and social life and for the growth of your community. I think that's very important. So I know we have a budget shortfall and we are looking at having issues with schools and filling them to capacity, but if there was any way possible, I believe that every community needs to have a high school because so much comes out of that, and it really does. It is the center of your community.
I just want to let you know that in District 3, we have a similar problem. When we did the redistricting, mine was the largest district, and when we did the redistricting, we're now the third largest but the fastest growing. We only have one high school in all of District 3. We don't have any other high schools. So we're facing something very similar, and I completely agree with you that we do need to get a school here. But the elephant in the room, and it's something that I'd like us to see work through the legislature, and something I'm going to be bringing up when we discuss our platform, is that we're not allowed to build schools unless, if we have other schools that are under capacity. What that does in District 3 is we've got, in my community in particular, the children are being bused over to Boynton High School. It takes a minimum of 30 minutes, sometimes 45 minutes. Then some of the other children are being bused down to Boca Raton. It's taking them 45 minutes and longer. And we were told, even if foundations were able to put together the money, that with that little piece of legislation existing, our hands are tied. So that's one of the things that's on my radar to work on with the legislation.
Be in the neighborhoods and the communities where people live. I don't need to repeat the financial issues that inhibit that, but we need to find ways to allow communities and neighborhoods to play a much closer and more important role in their schools.
You know, I'm not familiar with the statistics behind Riviera Beach specifically, but each school, you know, from a business perspective, has a carrying capacity of students. So let's say the school, 5,000 students or whatever it is. If the school is over capacity and there's a need for more schools, then that would need to be figured into the budget. Now the budget, obviously, if I'm poor, for example, and I want a car and I need a car, but I can't afford a car doesn't just show up. Somebody has to either give it to me or have to, get more revenue. How does the school district get more revenue? We have to go to the county commissioners and say, this is our budget. If it's not approved because it's too high for the cost for the school, then we have to do a millage increase to get more tax revenue through. So it's really I don't think it's so much a question for the board as much as it's a question for the taxpayers. Are you willing to invest in Palm Beach County schools to build the schools that we need to hit capacity? And I wouldn't isolate it just to Riviera Beach. I'd say, these are where our schools are overpopulated. This is where we need to build more schools. This is the budget to build more schools. Will you approve this budget? If so, and the taxpayers approve it, then you build a school. Now, if the school isn't at capacity, then I would actually want to fix the school that's already there because we already have that infrastructure there. There's no need to build another school if it's under capacity. But for new schools, it's really whether or not the taxpayers want to pay for it. But I would support it. I mean, I don't mind paying more taxes, but whether the other people do is
we're $73 million in the hole, and that's why we can't build you the school. So the first thing we have to do is figure out why we're $73 million in the hole. And then once we do that, we can make it a priority to build you the school. But the first thing we got is figure out why we're $73 million in the hole. Thank you.
I was at the district and we worked hard on trying to get that high school built in Riviera Beach. And actually the relocation of Suncoast from this site was part of the dominoes that we're going to have that happen. It was going to be built on this site. There was 8 years in trying to find a site. There was a lot of shuffling with rebuilding JFK, Bethune, putting Suncoast over on that site on an additional piece of property that was acquired. But in those years, the school district lost what it called charter district status, where it had a lot more local control, which also allowed it to look at its facilities based on the program needs of the facilities, not just the size of the facility. And so 2 things came to play that prevented that school moving forward, just as I was starting to retire. One was, first and foremost, was the loss of the charter district status, which gave the school district that kind of flexibility. And so I think you got to start with the legislature, because it's right, the state will not allow you to build an additional high school unless you can demonstrate the capacity on a space issue, rather than looking at the way the schools are used. A lot of these schools are full, but they're full based on program.
And when they're mentioning capacity, it's actually over capacity by 10%.
When you thought about Riviera Beach, those of you that remember, you thought about Suncoast High School because that was the hub of the community. People were proud in Riviera Beach to have graduated and to went to Suncoast. There was a sense of belonging. There was a sense of community. Parents were involved. The community was involved because they knew that Suncoast was their school. And it's most important that we do put another high school back in Riviera Beach so that we're not busing out, again, our students, and we can get that sense of belonging and sense of pride again in Riviera Beach, knowing that we have a school in Riviera Beach that meets the needs of our students and a school that our parents and community will be proud of.
And actually, that's why I got it in the budget some years ago, and Mr. Moore has done a pretty good job of outlining the roadblocks that have gotten in the way thus far. But my answer to the question is, before I vote for that, there's 2 other things I want to vote for. One is I want to vote to put a $250,000 referendum on the ballot for capital, so we can raise the money. And then secondly, I want to move Roosevelt Leadership Academy for Young Men to the historic Roosevelt High School site and repair that site and bring it up to its historic luster. And then I want to vote for the Riviera Beach High School.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cedric Thomas. So just in total transparency, I'm an elected official here in the city. So we welcome you here and we're glad that you're here. But what I really want to ask you is about the economics and the private contractors who do work for the district, such as myself. There's a lot of bureaucracy that are not allowing individuals to take part in the funds that go through there. And what I would like to know from each of you is, are you going to monitor that so that they don't squeeze the small black businesses such as myself out of doing business with the school district? They are one of the larger employers in this county. So I'd like to hear how you feel about that. Are you going to pay attention to it? Do you understand what's going on with the individuals who contract with the district?